We can't cancel Adele. That would ruin your sister's entire year. My mother's voice came through the phone with the same dismissive tone she'd used my entire life. I gripped the hospital bed rail tighter, feeling the pre-surgery anxiety mix with something much worse, complete abandonment. Mom, I need emergency surgery to remove a tumor. I just need you to watch the twins for a few hours, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My twin baby girls, Sophia and Grace, were only 8 months old, and the thought of them being with strangers while I was under anesthesia terrified me. You're being a problem again. Always so dramatic, my father's voice joined in from the background. Can't you find someone else? We've had these tickets for months. I'm Naomi Clark, 34 years old, and I've spent most of my adult life being the family's financial safety net. I work as a senior marketing manager for Hollowgate Systems here in Portland, Oregon, and despite being a single mother to twin girls, I've never missed sending my parents their monthly assistance, $500 every month, plus groceries when they're tight, plus the down payment for my sister's car last year. I thought that kind of support meant something. I thought it meant I could count on them when I truly needed help. The concert is tomorrow night, my mother continued. Your sister would be devastated if we missed it. Surely your surgery can wait a day or two. The surgeon had been clear. The tumor needed to come out immediately. Every day we waited increased the risk of complications. But here I was, lying in a hospital gown, having this conversation with people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Mom, this isn't something I can reschedule. It's cancer. They need to operate now, I whispered, feeling tears sting my eyes. Well, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you should have thought of this before having babies without a father around, my mother snapped. We have obligations too, you know. The line went quiet, except for my father muttering something about me always creating problems at the worst times. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the tiny holes to keep myself from completely falling apart. My sister, Kelly, had never asked them for anything because she'd never had to. I'd been covering her expenses for years. The car I helped buy, the credit card debt I'd quietly paid off, the rent money when she was between jobs. Something cold settled in my chest as I realized this wasn't shock or surprise. Deep down, I'd always known where I stood in their priorities. The tumor hadn't just revealed itself in my scan, it had revealed something equally poisonous that had been growing in our family dynamic for years. Growing up, I'd always been the responsible one. While Kelly spent her teenage years focused on friends and boyfriends, I was working part-time jobs and saving for college. My parents praised her social life and worried that I was too serious for my own good. When she dropped out of college halfway through her sophomore year to find herself, they supported her decision. When I graduated summa cum laude and landed my first marketing job, they barely acknowledged it. The pattern continued into adulthood. When my parents faced foreclosure 3 years ago, I'd liquidated my entire emergency fund to help them keep the house. When Kelly needed a car for her new job, I'd covered the down payment without hesitation. Every birthday, every holiday, every family crisis, I was the one they called, not to check on me, but to ask what I could contribute. Even when I got pregnant with the twins through IVF, deciding to become a single mother by choice, my parents' first concern wasn't my health or happiness. It was whether I'd still be able to help out financially with babies to support. I'd assured them I would, and I'd kept that promise, even through the exhausting early months of twin motherhood. Naomi always lands on her feet, my mother would tell people, as if my stability was effortless rather than carefully built through sacrifice and hard work. She's got that good job and everything figured out. What they didn't see were the nights I'd stayed up until 2 a.m. working after the babies finally fell asleep, making sure I could cover my own bills and theirs. They didn't see me eating cereal for dinner so I could afford to send them grocery money. They didn't see me postponing my own medical checkups because I was stretched so thin. But I justified it all by telling myself that family was everything, that blood meant something, that if I ever truly needed them, they'd be there for me the way I'd been there for them. The surgeon knocked on my door, pulling me from. "Miss Clark, we're ready to take you into surgery now. Is your child care situation sorted out?" I nodded, having spent the last hour arranging for a professional babysitter through an emergency service. It cost more than I could afford, but I had no choice. "Yes, everything's arranged." "Good, your neighbor seems very reliable," he said, consulting his chart. "Mrs. Patterson, right? She's been asking about you." I almost corrected him, then realized it didn't matter. The elderly woman next door had shown more concern for my well-being in the past hour than my own parents had shown in years. Maybe that said everything I needed to know about who my real family was. The anesthesia had worn off by evening, leaving me groggy, but aware of the hollow ache in my chest that had nothing to do with the surgery. The tumor was gone, benign thankfully, but the emotional wound my parents had inflicted felt raw and infected. I stared at my phone for an hour before finally checking my messages. Nothing from my parents, not even a text asking if I'd survived the surgery. But there were 3 messages from my sister Kelly, each one more excited than the last about the Adele concert, photos of her outfit, videos of her and my parents getting ready, updates about their seats. In the final video, I could hear my mother in the background saying, "Naomi will be fine. She always is." The nurse came in to check my vitals and found me crying. "Are you in pain?" "I can increase your medication." "No," I said, wiping my eyes. "It's not that kind of pain." When I was discharged the next morning, I called the babysitter to arrange pickup of the twins. Mrs. Patterson had apparently been checking on them every few hours, and the sitter reported that Sophia and Grace were perfectly content. I paid the bill, nearly $300 for overnight care, without complaint. It was worth every penny to know my daughters had been safe and loved while I couldn't be there. Driving home with the twins babbling happily in their car seats, I felt something shift inside me. The medication made everything feel slightly surreal, but my thoughts were crystal clear. I was done being the family bank account, done being taken for granted, done pretending that my parents' love came without conditions. At home, I opened my laptop and canceled the automatic transfer I'd set up years ago. $500 a month that would now stay in my daughter's college fund where it belonged. I deleted my parents' numbers from my grocery delivery app and canceled the credit card I'd given them for emergencies. Then I blocked their numbers entirely. It felt both terrifying and liberating, like jumping off a cliff while knowing I had wings. The twins needed their afternoon nap, and as I settled them in their cribs, Grace reached up and touched my face with her tiny hand. Sophia gave me one of her gummy smiles that never failed to melt my heart. These 2 perfect little humans were my priority now, not parents who couldn't be bothered to call after my surgery, not a sister who took my generosity for granted. I'd spent years believing that love meant constant giving, constant availability, constant sacrifice. But watching my daughters sleep peacefully, I realized I'd been modeling the wrong lesson. Love was supposed to be reciprocal. Love was supposed to show up when it mattered most. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, probably my parents trying to reach me from Kelly's phone. I turned the phone face down and went to make myself a proper dinner for the first time in months. 3 days passed in blissful silence, no demanding calls about late bills, no guilt trips about family obligations, no requests for emergency money transfers. I focused entirely on healing and caring for Sophia and Grace, discovering what life felt like when I wasn't constantly worried about everyone else's problems. On Thursday evening, as I was giving the twins their baths, someone pounded on my apartment door with the kind of urgency that suggested an emergency. My heart rate spiked as I quickly wrapped both babies in towels and carried them to the living room. Through the peephole, I saw Kelly standing in the hallway, her face red and tear-streaked. She was alone, which surprised me. Usually, when there was family drama, my parents sent her as their messenger while they maintained their dignity in the background. "Naomi, I know you're in there," she called out. "Please, we need to talk. Something terrible has happened." I considered ignoring her, but Sophia started crying at the loud noise, and I didn't want to upset the babies. I cracked the door open, keeping the chain lock engaged. What do you want, Kelly? Can I come in, please? I've been calling and texting for 2 days. Mom and Dad are freaking out because you're not responding. I'm not available to them anymore, I said calmly, or to you, for that matter. Her eyes widened with what appeared to be genuine confusion. What do you mean, Naomi? This is serious. Dad lost his job yesterday. They're going to lose the house. I felt a flicker of the old panic, the immediate urge to ask how much they needed and how quickly I could transfer it. But I pushed that feeling down and studied my sister's face more carefully. She looked genuinely distressed, but there was something else there, something that reminded me of the way she used to look when she wanted to borrow my car or needed me to cover for her with our parents. That's unfortunate, I said finally, but it's not my problem. Not your problem? Naomi, you've been helping them for years. They're counting on you. We all are. Were you counting on me when I needed surgery and they chose a concert instead? Kelly's expression shifted, and I could see her trying to formulate an explanation that would make her parents' behavior seem reasonable. That was different. They had those tickets for months, and your surgery turned out fine anyway. You're being dramatic about this. The word dramatic hit me like a physical blow. It was the same word my father had used, the same dismissive attitude that had characterized my entire relationship with my family. Even now, even after everything, they couldn't acknowledge that they'd done anything wrong. I had emergency surgery to remove a tumor, and instead of watching my children, they went to a concert, I said slowly. And I'm the one being dramatic? You know Mom has anxiety about medical stuff, and they really did have those tickets. Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop. I don't want to hear explanations or excuses. I'm done subsidizing people who can't be bothered to show up when I need them. Kelly's mask finally slipped completely. You can't just abandon your family because of one misunderstanding. What kind of person does that? Mom and Dad are scared, Naomi. They don't know what they're going to do without your help. They should have thought of that before treating me like a bank account instead of a daughter. I started to close the door, but Kelly pushed against it. Wait, what if Dad apologizes? What if they both apologize? Would you consider helping then? The desperation in her voice was almost pathetic, but what struck me most was the transactional nature of her proposal, not that they were sorry for hurting me, but that they might be willing to say sorry if it meant the money would start flowing again. This isn't about apologies, I said, stepping back from the door. This is about finally seeing who you all really are. Kelly's face crumpled. We're your family, Naomi. We love you. You know that, right? No, I said quietly. You love what I provide. There's a difference. I could see her trying to process this, her mind working to find the right words to change my mind. But instead of reflecting on the truth of what I'd said, she shifted into attack mode. You're being selfish, she said, her voice rising. You make good money, you don't have a husband to support, and you've always been fine taking care of everyone. Why are you changing the rules now? The casual cruelty of her words, the implication that being a single mother made my financial struggles less valid, that my success meant I owed them something, crystallized everything I'd been feeling. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a communication issue. This was who they were and who they'd always been. I'm changing the rules because I finally realized I've been playing a rigged game, I said. And I'm done losing. I closed the door and turned the deadbolt, ignoring Kelly's continued knocking and pleading. Grace had started crying again, disturbed by the loud voices, and I focused on comforting her while Sophia babbled contentedly in my arms. After about 10 minutes, the knocking stopped, and I heard Kelly's car start in the parking lot. I felt strangely hollow, like I'd just performed surgery on myself and removed something that had been poisoning me for years. My phone rang immediately, a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail and played the message back while preparing the twins' dinner. Naomi, this is your mother. Her voice was strained, more formal than usual. Kelly told us about your conversation. We need to discuss this situation like adults. Please call me back immediately. The tone was all wrong, no acknowledgement of my surgery, no concern for my well-being, just irritation that I wasn't falling in line. I deleted the message and blocked that number too. Over the next few days, they tried everything: calls from different numbers, emails to my work account, even a card in the mail from my father with a formal, stilted apology that read like it had been written by committee. But nothing addressed the fundamental issue. They still saw me as a resource to be managed rather than a person to be loved. The most telling attempt came when Kelly showed up at my office building during lunch. Security called to ask if I wanted to meet with her in the lobby, and I could see her through the window, pacing and checking her phone. She looked tired and stressed, probably because she was dealing with the full weight of our parents' expectations for the first time in her life. I told security I wasn't available and watched from my office window as Kelly finally gave up and drove away. It should have felt satisfying, but instead, I just felt sad for the family relationships I'd thought we had, sad for the years I'd wasted trying to earn love that was never really available, and sad for my daughters, who would grow up without grandparents because those grandparents had chosen pride over connection. But beneath the sadness was something stronger: relief. For the first time in my adult life, I was making decisions based solely on what was best for me and my children. The financial pressure was still there, but it was honest pressure, the normal challenge of supporting my own family rather than 3 families on one income. 2 weeks after Kelly's office ambush, I was settling into my new reality. The twins were thriving, my recovery was progressing well, and I'd even managed to start putting money aside for the first time in years. Without the constant drain of supporting my parents, I could afford things like organic baby food and a better child care arrangement that didn't leave me scrambling every time they got sick. I was giving Sophia and Grace their evening bath when I heard the familiar sound of a car door slamming in the parking lot, followed by heavy footsteps on the stairs. My apartment was on the 2nd floor, and the footsteps stopped right outside my door. The knock was different this time, not Kelly's desperate pounding, but a slow, deliberate rap that somehow managed to convey authority and entitlement. I dried my hands on a towel and looked through the peephole. My father stood in the hallway, wearing his best jacket and holding his hat in his hands like a character from an old movie. Behind him, partially hidden in the shadows, was my mother. She looked smaller than I remembered, her shoulders hunched with what could have been shame or simply fatigue. I stood there for a long moment, watching them through the peephole. My father shifted his weight from foot to foot and checked his watch. My mother whispered something to him, and he shook his head curtly. They looked like people waiting for a job interview they weren't sure they wanted. Part of me wanted to open the door, just to see what they would say, but a larger part of me remembered lying in that hospital bed, terrified and alone, while they enjoyed a concert. I remembered the casual way my mother had dismissed my cancer scare, the automatic assumption that my needs would always come second to their wants. The twins were splashing happily in their bath, completely oblivious to the drama playing out in the hallway. I looked at their innocent faces and made a decision that felt both easy and final. I walked away from the door. They knocked again, more insistently this time. Then I heard my father's voice, muffled but clear enough to understand. "Naomi, we know you're in there. We can hear the babies. We just want to talk." Then my mother's voice, higher and more strained. "Please, honey, we're your parents. We love you." I almost laughed at the timing of that declaration. Where was that love when I needed emergency surgery? Where was it during all the years I'd sacrificed my own financial security for theirs? Love shouldn't have to be declared during a crisis. It should be demonstrated consistently through actions. They stayed for almost an hour, occasionally knocking and calling out. At one point, my father's voice took on the edge of anger I remembered from childhood. "This is ridiculous, Naomi. You can't just shut out your family because your feelings got hurt. We raised you better than this." But they hadn't raised me better than this. They'd raised me to be convenient, to be available, to prioritize their needs over my own. The person who was strong enough to set boundaries, who valued herself enough to demand reciprocal love, that person I'd had to raise myself. Eventually, the hallway fell silent. I heard their footsteps retreating, heard car doors slam, and an engine start. When I was sure they were gone, I checked the peephole again and saw that my father had left something on the doormat. It was an envelope with my name written in his careful handwriting. I stared at it for a long time before deciding to leave it there. Whatever was inside, another hollow apology, a list of their financial troubles, a guilt trip disguised as a letter. I didn't need to read it. The envelope stayed on my doormat for 3 days before Mrs. Patterson, my elderly neighbor, knocked to ask if I wanted her to bring it inside. I thanked her but left it where it was, like a test of my own resolve. Every time I stepped over it, I felt a little stronger. On Friday morning, as I was leaving for work with the twins, I finally picked it up not because I wanted to read it, but because I was tired of seeing my father's handwriting every time I came home. I threw it in the dumpster on my way to the car. At the office, my colleague Brittany noticed I seemed different. "You look relaxed," she said during our morning meeting, like genuinely relaxed. "What's your secret?" I almost told her about cutting off my family, but something held me back. It still felt too fresh, too raw to share with anyone who might try to convince me to reconcile. Instead, I just smiled and said I'd been sleeping better. The truth was, I had been sleeping better. For the first time in years, I wasn't lying awake worrying about whether my parents could make their mortgage payment or whether Kelly needed money for car repairs. My stress dreams had shifted from financial catastrophes to normal working mother anxieties, daycare germs, project deadlines, the twins' sleep schedules. That afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number with a local area code. My first instinct was to ignore it, assuming it was another attempt by my family to reach me, but something made me answer. "Miss Clark, this is Janet from Meridian Bank. I'm calling about the account ending in 4782. There's been some unusual activity, and we wanted to verify." I interrupted her. "I'm sorry, but I don't have an account with that number. The account is listed under Thomas Clark and Margaret Clark, but you're listed as an authorized user and emergency contact. My parents' account, the one I'd removed myself from years ago, or so I thought. I need to be removed from that account immediately," I told Janet. "I'm no longer associated with those account holders in any capacity." "Of course, Miss Clark, I can process that removal right away. But I should let you know, the account is significantly overdrawn, and there have been several returned payment attempts this week. As the emergency contact, you would normally be notified." "I don't want to be notified about anything related to that account," I said firmly. "Please remove all my information and don't contact me again about their financial situation." After I hung up, I sat in my office chair, feeling oddly detached from the news. A few months ago, hearing that my parents were in financial trouble would have sent me into immediate crisis mode. I would have been calculating how much I could transfer, what bills I could delay, how I could solve their problem before it got worse. Now, I felt nothing but a mild curiosity about how long it had taken them to drain their account without my monthly contributions. 3 weeks, apparently. That told me everything I needed to know about how they'd been managing their money all these years. My phone buzzed with a text from another unknown number. "Naomi, this is Kelly. Mom and Dad's electricity got shut off. They're staying with me, but my landlord says they can't stay long. Can we please talk?" I deleted the message without responding. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my banking app and looked at my account balance. For the first time since the twins were born, I had a substantial emergency fund, money that was mine, earmarked for my daughter's future instead of my parents' poor financial decisions. I_manager. I smiled and put my phone away. The cycle was finally broken, and it felt like freedom. Looking back, I realized that sometimes the greatest act of love toward yourself is walking away from people who only love what you can give them. And I had finally learned that lesson well enough to protect my daughters from repeating my mistakes.